taking a look at the diplomatic push to recognize the state of Palestine, Canada, France, and the United Kingdom. And we're going across to Beirut this morning, international coordinator for the Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, Charlotte Cates. Charlotte, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation.
Yes, we've seen Charlotte over a period of time and in the last few weeks and months, in particular, this diplomatic push to recognize, to officially recognize Palestine as a state. And just looking at it from your perspective, how do you see this playing out? Because we do see some prominent countries, the likes of Canada, the UK, France, at this point in time. How do you see this playing out while these talks are taking place behind the scenes?
Unfortunately, while we're seeing these states take public positions saying that they plan to recognize some version of what they're calling a Palestinian state and would more accurately be described as a Palestinian state on paper only or a fake state, what these states are not doing is ending their complicity in the ongoing Zionist genocide in Gaza. So at the same time that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, was declaring that they had some intention, and it is important to be clear that they were quite vague about this intention of recognizing a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September. The Arms Embargo Now coalition in Canada released a report revealing that since 2024, when Canada's government promised that it was going to stop exporting arms and weaponry to the Zionist state, the fact is that arms exports to Israel have continued and in many ways increased during that time. And so Canada, first and foremost, the best way that it can support Palestinians is by stopping providing ongoing military, diplomatic, and political support to the Zionist regime, imposing sanctions on it, imposing a trade barrier on it, putting an end to the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement. The same is certainly true for France and Britain. Just weeks ago, Britain criminalized Palestine Action, the direct action organization that has been confronting directly and carrying out direct actions against Israeli arms factories in Britain, and labeled it a terrorist organization. Hundreds of people have been arrested in just the past few weeks for doing nothing more than holding up a sign that says, "I support Palestine Action, stop the genocide." France continues its arms exports to Israel. It continues to criminalize activists for Palestine in France. It continues to prosecute people for seeking to stop the genocide and for openly supporting the absolutely internationally recognized right to resist of the Palestinian people. So when we're talking about these states that are not observers and not neutral bystanders, but in fact active participants in the genocide, their first priority should be imposing sanctions on Israel, the criminal entity that is carrying out the genocide, rather than having vague discussions about the recognition of a Palestinian state, when their version of a Palestinian state is one that is stripped of sovereignty, basic democratic rights, and finally is an absolute right that belongs to the Palestinian people as the exercise of their fundamental right to independence and self-determination, and not something that is granted based on conditions imposed by the very same parties that are, frankly, in the case of Britain, directly responsible for the implantation of the Zionist project in the region to begin with.
Yes, Charlotte. In fact, just last night, interesting you make mention of the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. I saw a video clip where he was being interviewed and questioned by journalists, and he seemed to be stuttering on the whole question of Palestine. And also, he sounded very, very vague. And this is where we begin to question the sincerity behind this call and this diplomatic push to recognize the state of Palestine, because at this point in time, still very, very unclear and, as I mentioned, very, very vague. So, again, putting to the test the genuineness or the sincerity behind this recognition of Palestine.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the fact is that if these states and their governments are sincere about wanting to respect the rights of the Palestinian people, their inalienable fundamental rights that belong to the Palestinian people and are not granted as a favor by Western imperialist powers, then the very first thing they can do is stop trading arms with the Zionist entity, stop allowing the arms to go through its ports, stop holding free trade agreements with Israel, stop criminalizing and arresting and repressing and declaring as terrorists not only the resistance organizations in Palestine that are exercising their internationally recognized right to resist occupation by all means necessary, including through armed struggle, but also grassroots activists in the streets of these countries who have been protesting to bring an end to the genocide. I mean, this is direct complicity with genocide under the terms of the Genocide Convention. And so the question of sincerity is to be found in how they are relating to the Zionist project that is actively carrying out a genocide. And you simply cannot be complicit and even participating in the genocide being carried out against the Palestinian people and uttering vague words about the potential quote unquote recognition of a Palestinian state, which they're labeling as a so-called demilitarized Palestinian state next to nuclear armed Israel and responsible for providing security for it. That's not statehood. That's not sovereignty. Statehood and sovereignty mean that the people of Palestine have the right to determine their own future, to develop their military, to protect themselves against this genocidal expansionist entity. Well, that's not at all within the vision that they're talking about. They are even vague about any kind of borders, about any kind of, about the rights of Palestinian refugees, the majority of the Palestinian population to return to their original homes and lands, an absolutely inalienable, internationally recognized right. None of these things are up for grabs. Instead, what we're talking about is the nominal recognition of the so-called state of Palestine, while the Palestinian people are denied all of the benefits and rights that accompany any meaningful form of statehood and self-determination. And so, again, if these states want to actually show support for the rights of the Palestinian people, if they are upset about the genocide, they could impose aid on the Palestinian people right now. They could cut off their relationships with the Zionist entity. They could expel its ambassadors. They could impose sanctions on it. They could block Israeli tourists from coming to their countries. They could impose a sports boycott, an academic boycott, an athletic boycott. I mean, we saw in 2022, in a situation that was absolutely not genocidal, the eagerness with which these states imposed all forms of sanctions on Russia and the Russian Federation. Well, if they're so concerned about a Palestinian state and the rights of the Palestinian people to achieve self-determination, frankly, they should, instead of talking about a demilitarized Palestinian state and calling on the resistance to disarm, they should be funding and arming the Palestinian resistance, because that's in fact the most effective way to confront and bring an end to this ongoing genocide. And so therefore it's clear that what they're engaging in is hypocrisy, and what they need to do is just don't make statements in the United Nations. Cut off the flow of arms that are going every day to slaughter Palestinians in Gaza.
Well, Charlotte, I can actually understand why you feel so strongly, and you've articulated it just so well. What I need to do is just to put you on hold for a minute or so. I want to play out a quick ad break and pay some bills. We'll be back.
Salam Media.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only R5 a day. or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Gaza needs your support more than ever. Homes have been shattered and families have lost everything. With your support, our teams are delivering clean water tankers, feeding the hungry, and assisting orphans who have no one left. Let us give Gaza whatever help we can. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Well, we continue our broadcast this morning with Charlotte Cates joining us out of Beirut against the background of the diplomatic push to recognize the state of Palestine. And Charlotte, just to continue, and there were many strong words that you had used just prior to us going on a break. But again, once again, this actually exposes the hypocrisy of the governments. We know what is playing out on the ground. We know how ordinary people feel about the genocide that is unfolding in Gaza, through the millions that have been hitting the streets week after week. But again, the nature of the beast that we are dealing with, we spoke about Canada, but we've just seen during the week, we've seen the meeting between Starmer and Donald Trump. And here we're talking of a completely different animal, where we've seen Donald Trump openly stating, backing Israel, rebuking Starmer over the recognition of of Palestine as a state as well. So, when we have something like this, and again, Trump's justification, you are rewarding Hamas if you do that, and I don't think they should be rewarded. So we see this rhetoric about Hamas being repeated over and over again. And once again, we see this continued reference made to October the 7th, forgetting what has been taking place for well over 77 years in Palestine.
Well, I mean, absolutely. What we've seen time and time again throughout the decades is that anytime there is an effective resistance movement defending the rights of the Palestinian people, it is basically the only reason for any real diplomatic gains that happen. But what we'll also see is any attempts possible in order to quash that resistance and substitute it with something that's taking place on paper and has no meaning in reality. So, for example, we saw the Great Intifada of 1987 to 1993 transformed into the Oslo Project, which has been one of the worst disasters for the Palestinian people, with the theft of increasing amount of land and the ever-growing threat of settler hordes throughout the West Bank of occupied Palestine. And right now we're seeing this once again. The fact is that October 7th, the Al-Aqsa flood brought forward a great and profound challenge and exposure of Zionism and U.S. imperialism in the region, and revealed the fact that they, militarily, while they have the technology, the bombs, the weaponry, they're capable of slaughtering a civilian population. The fact is that their soldiers were utterly unable to hold themselves together against the Palestinian resistance. And so there's an attempt to wipe out that resistance by all means. There's an attempt to force the resistance resistance to disarm itself, which is certainly Palestinians have learned the lessons of Sabra and Shatila in Beirut in 1982, where weeks after the Palestinian resistance disarmed itself and left Beirut and went to Tunis, thousands of Palestinian civilians were massacred in the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila by phalangist organizations led and directed by the Zionist military invading and occupying Beirut. So, of course, there's an attempt to disarm the resistance, to criminalize Hamas, to create a stigma against the Palestinian resistance, and to label it as terrorism. But the fact is that under international law, people who are subjected to colonialism and occupation have absolutely every right to take up arms to liberate themselves from the occupation. And furthermore, the occupying power does not have any right to, quote unquote, defend itself against the same people that it has subjected to occupation. And this is according to the terms of international law, with all of the influence that Western imperialist powers have had over the development of that area of law. So when we see these kinds of declarations and statements from, whether we're talking about the Starmer version, which is characterizing Palestine Action as a quote unquote terrorist organization, or whether we're talking about the Trump version, it's like we're witnessing a debate between Ehud Olmert and Netanyahu, or Yair Lapid and Benjamin Netanyahu about what is the best path for Zionism in the region. Well, the fact is that the best path for humanity is no Zionism in the region, not perpetuating the Zionist project through this means or by that means, but by bringing it to an end. And that's really the only way that people can have peace and security in the region altogether. Any effective Palestinian resistance is going to be targeted. It's going to be harassed. It's going to be subjected to criminalization. I mean, the fact is that the leadership and membership of Hamas, alongside the entire Palestinian people, have made great sacrifices in order to bring forward the Palestinian struggle for liberation and for return and for putting an end to this horrible genocidal project that has been assaulting the region for the past 78 years. And so really, the demand, I think, is really to us around the world, to the people in the neighboring countries, and to certainly the citizens of these imperialist states who, frankly, our governments are trying to quell our anger by saying, oh, we're going to, quote unquote, recognize a Palestinian state in September. But what our anger and our outrage is about the death dealing that all of our governments are implicated in a daily, ongoing basis in Gaza and throughout occupied Palestine. And so it's going to be the resistance that's going to lead the way to an actual self-determined, independent, liberated Palestine. It's not going to be a grant of well wishes from the very same parties that are responsible for the ongoing crimes. If they are interested in putting an end to the crimes, they have to take action to do so. And it's very easy to do so by imposing an immediate two-way arms embargo, by sanctioning the Zionist regime, by expelling their ambassadors, cutting off diplomatic and trade relations, and actually punishing the party that is responsible, which is the Zionist entity. And yet what we see again and again from these states, whether we're talking about the US approach, which we might call the Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich approach, or whether we're seeing the Yair Lapid, Ehud Olmert approach from Keir Starmer and Mark Carney, well, both of these approaches are deadly to the Palestinian people. And what Palestinians need instead is their basic rights and an end to the ongoing flow of support and aid to their killers and to the genocidaires in Palestine.
Yes, Charlotte. But also what these leaders and these governments are not doing is they are not listening to the voices of the people. And this is right across the entire board. And also in South Africa, although South Africa took the matter up to the ICJ, there is criticism still leveled against the South African government, particularly with regard to coal exports that are actually fueling this genocide. And there is a lot of pressure on the South African government to do something about this. But again, these governments, these leaders are listening to the voices of Netanyahu. They're listening to the voices of Ben-Gvir, of Smotrich, and we've also seen America talking about recognition of the Palestinian state. as a slap in the face to the victims of October the 7th. But this also comes at a time where within Israel, they are not listening to voices out of Israel. Organizations like Physicians for Humanity, organizations like B'Tselem, who has released this 88-page report, condemning Israel genocide, and even talking about October the 7th being a trigger for Israel to do what it has been planning to do for a very, very long time, because this ultra-right supremacist government was formed long before October the 7th. So it has been a plan in the making, and it's just amazing. And the governments fail to recognize this very fact, that this has been a plan in the making for a long time to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to get rid of the Palestinians altogether, and to end Israel and its expansionist land grabbing policy, which has been a policy for a very, very long time.
Yes, this is absolutely the case. This is 100% true. I mean, also, it's important to note that the Palestinian resistance revealed, and what we've seen time and time again, is that when the Palestinian resistance comes out with information, materials, and documentation, is that the resistance's narrative and story can be relied upon, where the Israeli narrative and story is frequently revealed to be nothing more than a pack of lies being sold to the population of the world. And so it's important to note that the Palestinian resistance stated that they had obtained intelligence information. And I mean, they were very effective actually in infiltrating and turning over the network of collaborators that the Zionist entity was using in the Gaza Strip. And so the resistance was able to obtain intelligence information that they were planning an offensive attack against the Gaza Strip from before the 7th of October. And so when we look at what the 7th of October was, this was a military action that was undertaken by the resistance of a colonized and occupied population seeking to bring an end to that colonization and occupation. And frankly, it was the responsibility of every state around the world, rather than providing aid and support and expressing sympathy to the colonizer and the occupier, to aid the Palestinian resistance in carrying out their mission to achieve that end.
Well, thanks for that, Charlotte. And I see we've just got a comment that has come through from one of our viewers this morning, just talking about Europe as a whole, talks about recognizing Palestine all the way in September, and but imposing an Orwellian crackdown and shipping weapons to the Nazi entity. EU's policy is literally writing Slava Ukraini on a German mortar shell that the IDF shoots as a South African aid truck, then yells at everyone else for not supporting Ukraine fanatically enough. Well, that actually sums it up. Charlotte, thank you very much for your time with us this morning. Really, it's been an absolute pleasure. Please take care and be well.
Thank you so much, and the same to you.
Sorry, Charlotte, you were saying?
I only said, and free Palestine. Let's see an end to this genocide now.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much for that. Charlotte Cates joining us out of Beirut this morning. We're going to go for a quick break. We come back. It's the time for Juma Inspirations.